Okay, so this week's focus is going to be on money in politics. Where the money comes from, where can it go, how it's reported, what are the rules? There's a lot of rules, and these are actually federal laws, that say who can donate what, to what candidate, to what party, to what political action committee. And I hope you understand that because there's a long history of the corrupting influence of money in politics, especially bribes, you might look at some of this stuff and some of these examples I give and say, it sounds like bribery to me. Legally, it isn't. A bribe would be somebody gives somebody $10,000, a state representative, to vote for a bill or not vote for a bill. And in the last year, honestly, there's been, in the city of Cincinnati, in the city council, there was a big corruption scandal over renovating buildings. There was bribes that went on to companies were giving kickbacks to politicians. This sounds like stuff from the 19th and early 20th century, but it still goes on. Kickbacks for a building contract. In the state of Ohio, there was the Speaker of the House of Ohio, Speaker of the House of the General Assembly of Ohio lost his job because it was found that he took bribes in this big energy bill. And lots of money was given to power plants and so forth, and it was found that he and others were given kickbacks from these energy companies to get these contracts. So money is still a big influence in politics, and bribery still has, I don't want to say a place in American politics, but it still happens in American politics. So that's why, to make a long story short, that's why there's a lot of rules concerning money and donations in politics. Now, money is supposed to be used for running campaigns. So individuals can give money to a presidential candidate, a candidate for governor, a city council candidate, a Colerain Township committee, somebody running for the Colerain Township committee. And those are perfectly legal, and that money is used, as long as it is used for campaign purposes, running commercials, making a website, hiring folks to do canvassing, door-to-door, connection with the people there, grassroots, what they call grassroots politicking. That's all perfectly legal. What's illegal is for someone to take their campaign money and to renovate their house or put a new roof on their house. There was a senator from Alaska about 15 years ago, I remember, that got in trouble for that. He used his campaign funds. He borrowed money from his campaign account to renovate his house up in Alaska. He started paying it back, which sounds legal, but it's not. As long as he's paying the money back, it's not. That money has to be used in your campaign fund, has to be used for campaigning. Okay, now let's get some terms down here. First of all, political action committee. Okay, that is part of an interest group. We talked about interest groups last week. Interest groups are groups that represent some kind of, for lack of a better word, interest. There's the American Medical Association, which recognizes and promotes the interest of health, doctors, nurses, and other healthcare workers. Okay, that is a special interest group, and they have a wide mission. So what they'll do is they'll run ads on television telling people to live healthier lives. They'll run ads on the web, promoting healthy lifestyles. They'll put a website together saying, hey, if you want information about how to live a healthy lifestyle, go to the American Medical Association website. Okay. Now, the political arm is separate because there's a lot of laws concerning political donations and money. They have to form a separate group called a political action committee. Okay, a political action committee specifically takes money. That political action committee hires lobbyists. Lobbyists, remember, are folks that are hired by political action committees and special interest groups to specifically influence politicians, okay, to get favorable legislation passed. Okay, so if a special interest group, if the American Medical Association raises money for its general broad mission, there's not a lot of rules with that. There are rules, they have to use that money for the mission of their special interest group, but they can't take that money and funnel it into a political action committee. They actually have to take separate donations for a political action committee. So they can canvass their members and say, would you like to give money to our political action committee? And they have to have a separate name for it. Doctors in Politics. I'm making that up. I don't know if that's their political action committee name or not. But they have to solicit funds specifically for that, and those funds have to be reported to the federal government, specifically the FEC, Federal Elections Commission, and they can be audited at any time to make sure by the FEC to make sure that those funds that are going to the PAC are specifically used for political purposes and not anything else. Okay, so this money is used from a voluntary basis for members, stockholders, or employees to contribute funds to favored candidates or political parties. So they could take that money and give it to somebody running for office, or they give it to their lobbyist to pay for their salary. Maybe that lobbyist will take a few politicians out to dinner in Washington, D.C. That dinner will be paid for by the Political Action Committee. Okay? Now, there are two types of money in politics. There's soft money and hard money. Okay? Hard money is the easier one to understand. Hard money is money given directly to a party or a candidate or an interest group. Okay? And that money is limited in amount. I'm pretty sure that the total amount somebody can give to a candidate running for office is $5,000. Once they reach that $5,000, they can't give any more money in their name. Okay, so that is the reason it's called hard money. It's because it's specifically given to a group or a candidate, and it's reported directly to the Federal Election Committee. Okay, so there's limits on that. Soft money, there's unlimited amounts on that. So that can be given to a political party for party building purposes. So if I want to give $5,000 to a presidential candidate, that's hard money. If I want to give $1 million to the Green Party, I can, okay? And that money then is used by the party for what they call party building purposes, to build the name, to promote the party, to promote the party's ideas. Okay, and the reason is why it's called soft money is because there are no limits on how much can be given. Okay, so now that we have those terms down, hopefully you understand those, there are types of organizations that the reason they have these affiliations or these tags are because of the federal election committees. Okay, these organizations have a political education purpose. Okay, and these are political action committees. It can be political action committees. Okay, there are groups called 501c3, and the reason they're called that is because in the IRS tax code, these groups fall under section 501c3. Okay, they're tax exempt. They are organized and operated exclusively for religious, charitable, scientific, literary, or educational purposes. Okay, so if you belong to a church and you give money to the church, they report that under 501c3, the rules in the IRS code. Okay, those are tax exempt. They have to be reported by the organization, but they don't have to pay taxes on it like it's income. Okay, they're allowed to lobby. So a religious organization, an educational organization, they are allowed to hire lobbyists to get legislation passed or to block legislation that is in or not in their best interest. Okay, there's also 501c4. These are social welfare agencies. They must be intended to benefit a community or the public at large. They're not a private group, but they have this charitable organization, this charitable wing. Okay, so Matthew 25 Ministries. I don't know if you've heard of Matthew 25 Ministries. They are, even though they're a religious-based organization, they're a social welfare agency. They collect money and items and give it to people in need, specifically people that have suffered from some kind of natural disaster, a flood, a tornado, a hurricane, and so forth. Okay, they're allowed to lobby as well. Okay, then there are non-GOs, non-government organizations. They're usually nonprofit. What nonprofit means is any money that this organization makes cannot be given to the people that run the organization as a bonus, or it can't be given to stockholders as dividends. It has to go directly back into the organization. For instance, the Museum Center in downtown Cincinnati, that is a nonprofit organization. If they make $1 million off of ticket sales, that $1 million has to go towards back into the organization. They might make a new exhibit. They might, expand their building and so forth. Sometimes these are international organizations. They're independent of governments. That's why they're called NGOs, and international government organizations, although a lot of times they are funded by these governments. One that's been in the news lately is the World Health Organization, the WHO. President Trump pulled us out of the WHO in the middle of the coronavirus pandemic. President Biden, by executive order, put us back in the World Health Organization. Okay, the federal government gives money to the World Health Organization, and their job is to promote health, whether that's through healthy choices, whether that's through preventing malaria, whether that's through providing the coronavirus vaccine to all countries around the world. Okay, that's a non-government organization, but they have a public interest in making sure that people are healthy. Okay, they are active in humanitarian, educational, healthcare, public policy, environmental, and so on and so forth. They can lobby as well. Okay, that's why I'm putting all these together, because all these organizations, even though they fall under different categories, they all can lobby. Okay, now the move towards watching money, setting up the Federal Elections Commission, looking for bribery in politics, making sure that money goes to where it's supposed to. That all is a result of Watergate in the 1970s. The first time that the federal government passed any kind of money in politics reform is recently has been after the Watergate scandal in the early 1970s. Okay, the more recent one is a Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, sometimes called the McCain-Feingold Bill. Notice McCain's a Republican. Feingold is a Democrat. They made this Bipartisan Reform Act in 2002. Okay, it largely banned party soft money. Okay, so it prevented people from giving millions and millions of dollars to politics. It really tried to limit the amount of money that entered politics, or at least people could give money in small amounts. That $5,000 limit was basically put into place by the McCain-Feingold bill, and it prohibited corporations and unions from using general treasury funds for election purpose. So if you belong to a union, or if you're in a corporation, they can't collect money from you and say, yeah, we're putting this in our interest group, and then funnel that money to a political action committee. They have to do that separately. Okay? The real important thing is it banned this soft money. It was trying to prevent, money from entering politics in million-dollar chunks. Okay? As you can see, the amount of political action committee contributions since the 70s has gone way up. Now, this graph only goes to 2006, but you can imagine, that trend has continued into the 2020s. Okay? This is really how people influence government. We say, and I tell you guys all the time, voting is very, very important. Become a registered voter. Be an informed voter. Don't just inform yourself around election time. Be part of the attentive public, the people that pay attention to politics year-round. Okay? But to have real influence over specific legislation and whether or not it's passed, political action committees have a big influence. So, I would say to you, if you can join a political action committee in your job, in your professional organization, do it because you'll have more influence over politics than just voting. I'm not saying, if you vote, you're not having an influence. You certainly are. That's the biggest influence. But on specific legislation, political action committees play a big role. Okay? Now, who does the money go to? This is really, really important. Okay? The money goes to generally incumbents, not to challengers. Now, the difference between an incumbent and a challenger is this, okay? In the 2020 election, the incumbent was Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the person that's already won the office. They're running for re-election. That's the incumbent. The challenger is the person that's trying to unseat that person, Joe Biden, and he successfully unseated Donald Trump. Okay? I want you to think of why most political campaign funds and political action committee funds go to incumbents. I'll let you think about that for a second. The answer is you want more bang for your buck. You want your money to go somewhere. If you're giving money to a candidate, you want the money to go to somebody it's going to have influence over. Okay? The House of Representatives and the Senate, the re-election rate, the incumbent re-election rate is 95%. 95%. So I want you to think about this. If you're giving money to somebody that's running for the House of Representatives in 2022, you're going to give more than likely, if you're smart with your money, you're going to give it to the person that already has the job and is running for re-election because they have a 95% chance of getting re-elected. Okay? Then if you help them with their re-election campaign, you've got some influence, or your political action committee has some influence and has the ear of that person after they win their office. That's important. Okay? So you want your money to go to, if somebody has a 5% chance of winning, you're probably not going to give the money to them. By the way, open seats on here an open seat is if the incumbent decides I am not running for re-election. Okay, then whoever's going to win that election is going to be a new representative or a new senator or a new president or whatever. So they usually give that money, that's 50-50 there. You got a 50-50 shot of making sure your money goes to the winning candidate. Now, going back to McCain-Feingold, that law, remember that it mainly banned large money, soft money, donations directly to parties and organizations, okay? That law was declared unconstitutional by the United States Supreme Court in January of 2010, okay, in a case called Citizens United. This case is one of the most controversial cases. I would say it's probably the most controversial case of the United States Supreme Court in the 21st century. That's just my opinion. I think a lot of people would agree with me, but a lot of citizens, a lot of Americans have not heard of this case. Okay, so basically, corporations and labor unions were banned under McCain-Feingold from giving large donations to political parties. Okay, so both of them sued, both of these organizations, corporations, various corporations and labor unions sued. And it actually focused on this documentary called Hillary, the movie, which was created by this group called Citizens United. Okay, Citizens United was an organization. They called themselves a political education organization. So they were one of those 503. Let's go back to here. They were one of those 503C organizations. They said they are there for educational purposes. They're trying to educate voters on various things. So they put together this movie called Hillary, the movie, and it was a documentary about Hillary Clinton. Okay, the Federal Elections Commission said this is a political movie. This is not a documentary. It's a political movie. It's a piece of propaganda against Hillary Clinton. So there were rules that said that they called it a political advertisement, that political advertisements of this nature cannot be aired during the election season, certain months of the election season. And Citizens United sued saying that violates our right to free speech. to just put our viewpoints out there. You can't say, all right, so the election is just started. You can run this documentary, but once we get within 3 months of the election, you can't run this anymore. They said that violated free speech, and the Supreme Court agreed with them. And in this ruling, the Supreme Court overturned McCain-Feingold, and they said it violates the rights of labor unions, corporations, other large organizations. It violates their free speech. And you might think, how does a corporation which has no mouth, cannot speak, has free speech? How can a labor union which has no means of actually, using vocals to communicate, how can they have free speech? And the answer is, it's because they can give money to politics. The Supreme Court has always recognized that money in politics is equal to free speech. And when you say you can't give money to a certain group, you're actually hindering the the political process. And that's what the First Amendment, the Supreme Court has always said, the highest function of the First Amendment is to make sure that political speech is not curtailed. Okay, because once you start curtailing political speech, you say this group can say this political thing, but this group cannot say this political thing. You're making judgments. And when you make judgments, you could turn the country into a dictatorship. So they said that corporations, labor unions, other large organizations actually have free speech rights. And that's what was controversial about it. So McCain-Feingold violated the First Amendment. Okay, so now I hope that helps you to understand money in politics. If you don't understand some of this stuff, please put it in your chart, your learning chart for the week. If you don't understand it, I'll make comments on there, or send you to a YouTube video or a website, or try to explain it better. So, and good luck with all of your assignments this week.